Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the Mission Impossible podcast that goes hard. Charles, I think we go hard each and every week. Would you agree with that?
Oh, hell yeah. We go real hard.
We go really hard. And we're about to go super hard because today is our first episode about the making of Rogue Nation. So how you feeling about that?
I feel good. We got a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. This is going to be another epic making of. I enjoy these ones maybe more than you do, but I like our making of episodes.
I do too, but I want to. Well, we've talked about doing a book or something at some point, but it would be fun to do a making of that is comprised exclusively of stuff we've gotten from our interviews.
Yes. Which I think, a book someday would be awesome. We'll do that.
Yes.
But to me, these making of episodes are about filling in all the holes and finding all these sources of other things that we haven't covered, or more details about everything that we've covered. And it's just a fun little diversion, I think, from the interviews.
Yeah, I think what I like about it is reading or seeing what people thought the movies were going to be, or what, all the conjecture and the sort of wrong paths that people have gone down in reporting the movies as well is nice. Kind of seeing that unfold in real time is fun.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've got a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to get into my favorite part of the show, which is the shout outs. And obviously this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon and his podcast, My Favorite Album, where Jeremy talks to artists, musicians, songwriters, actors about the music they love and how it's influenced them and their work. And this episode is also brought to you by John B. So that's pretty much it for me, Charles. Should we just jump right into this making of Rogue Nation?
Yeah, I think it's time. Just you get to kick us off. Let's hear it.
Okay, let's kick it off. So we're going back to December 22nd, 2011. This is right after Ghost Protocol has been released to theaters. Simon Pegg has discussed how there were plans for Tom Cruise to retire from the Mission Impossible series. Pegg said, "I think that might have been the plan earlier, but as the film progressed and we enjoyed it so much, I think the idea of Ethan Hunt retiring fell by the wayside. Tom suddenly remembered why he loved doing these films so much and suddenly thought, well, maybe I do want to do more." We, of course, know there's much more to that story from our interview with Robert Elswit, which was in episodes 34 and 35. So what do you recall from that interaction, Charles?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think people should, if you haven't listened to our Elswit episode, you absolutely should. It's some of our favorites. He was the cinematographer on both Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, and he tells the story of what was going on, that there were people trying to get Cruise out of the series. So but it's funny to hear Pegg kind of give the polished response when asked at the time.
Right. The media-friendly version of that story.
Yeah.
Because as we know, there were forces outside of the movie that were sort of conspiring to change the path of the series, and obviously it got back on the right path. But yeah, that's really interesting. Pegg went on to say about a possible MI5, it'd be nice to see them go into a mission a little bit better equipped and prepared and have some things that actually work, which is sort of weird because that is the whole thesis of Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, well, I think he probably finally got to be a part of the team, and now he wants to be a part of the team that has more stuff work, I guess.
That has functioning gadgets and stuff.
Yeah. All right, so Collider reports on April 16th, 2012, that Brad Bird doesn't believe he will be returning for MI5. Then Slash Film announces on October 29th, 2012, that Tom Cruise has been thinking about what to make for the fifth installment in the Mission franchise. He says, "We're already working on different images, talking conceptually. I love traveling around promoting different movies because I'm always looking at different places, and I always walk around to see the city. I look at architecture, subways, coming up with different sequences. I started Mission Impossible hoping I could make many of them. It's a character that I can grow with. At that time, it was the most expensive film in the history of Paramount Pictures, and the first film I was producing. It's been pretty exciting. I'll make a bunch of those. I'll make as many as people want to see, because they're very challenging and so much fun to make." I love that quote.
That's great. Still waiting on a subway sequence. Although I guess there is a little bit of a train underground sequence in Rogue Nation, so maybe he was inspired by...
Yeah.
Yeah. So on May 6, 2013, Deadline says that Paramount and Skydance Productions have reached a deal with Tom Cruise to star in a fifth Mission Impossible film. The writer-director remains unconfirmed, but based on quote-unquote frequent collaboration, Deadline speculates that Christopher McQuarrie will be helming the film.
And Cruise and McQuarrie first worked together on Valkyrie, of course, which came out in 2008, and McQuarrie wrote and produced. Cruise says when they first met, McQuarrie pulled up in the coolest car and was just very casual. At first they talked about cars, then they talked about Jersey. McQuarrie is from there, Cruise is from Syracuse, New York. And then they started talking about movies. That was the beginning of this very fruitful working relationship.
So back to around 2013, Cruise and McQuarrie had worked together at that point on Valkyrie, Ghost Protocol, Jack Reacher, and Oblivion, and they were currently working on Edge of Tomorrow. Cruise and McQuarrie were in the middle of the night trying to figure out the ending of the movie. In the middle of working, Cruise said, "You should direct the next Mission Impossible." McQuarrie said, okay. He was reluctant because he'd seen what Mission Impossible does to a director when he was doing rewrites on the set of Ghost Protocol. But right at that moment, Cruise picks up the phone and calls Brad Gray, and then comes back a minute later and says, "You're directing Mission Impossible."
Of course, McQuarrie has told that story several times, and we love it. It's so funny. On May 24th, 2013, Screen Crush reported that Tom Cruise had left The Man from U.N.C.L.E. months before filming to focus on MI5 with writer Drew Pearce and director Christopher McQuarrie. So I must have missed this. Did you know that he was going to be in The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
No, I had no idea. I'm assuming this is the Guy Ritchie version and not the Steven Soderbergh version.
That's probably true.
Yeah. No, I don't remember this at all.
Now it makes me want to dig in and find out. Was he? Yeah, because that's right. Soderbergh was going to do The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, it was going to be Soderbergh and Clooney's final movie together.
Okay, well then in that case, yeah, clearly it was Clooney and not Cruise. So maybe it was the Guy Ritchie version.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a double-hander. He could have been the other character.
Right.
So.
Well, when I came across that, I was like, oh my God, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
McQuarrie said that when they started working on MI5, the only thing on the list of things that had to be done was Ethan has to get a mission. That was the only thing that Cruise insisted had to be in the movie. So I'm assuming it's the sequence in the record store?
Yeah, I guess getting the mission briefing, getting a mission, yeah.
Right. Weird.
So McQuarrie's original vision for MI5, as he has described, was to take the first 4 movies in the series, lay them on top of one another, and look for the holes, which is kind of a cool approach. I know we were talking about this earlier today, and you kind of weren't sure exactly what that meant.
Right.
To me, I thought it meant maybe that he was sort of putting the 4 movies together and looking and see, what are there any loose ends that need to be tied,
or maybe were there any areas where they came up short in some regard.
Right.
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's actually probably part of it as well. Yeah. So. One thing they knew is they didn't want to have an internal rift in the IMF because that had been done before. McQuarrie wanted to create a greater outside pressure instead of the IMF having problems from within. They, of course, started by creating the set pieces and then rearranging them around the story. Now we know that's how every one of the Mission movies has been made, other than MI3, it seems.
Right. Well, here's a good quote from Cruise at the time. He said, "You see, even from the first mission, how Brian De Palma shot Prague and the Charles Bridge. It was beautiful and eerie. So when audiences see it, I want to transport them. I want to bring them to these places. With a mission, it's like finding the architecture that will give us story. We built sequences within cities and celebrate their architecture and their beauty, the aesthetics of their culture. That's part of what Mission Impossible is. It's a journey that celebrates locations."
I love that.
Yeah. It's funny because they've gone back to so many places for the past few movies too, which is kind of
but
funny.
they find new places within those places.
They do.
So McQuarrie says he and Cruise fell in love with London when they were shooting Edge of Tomorrow there with Doug Liman. That made them want to come back for this, and then of course again in Fallout. McQuarrie wanted to hit all the major landmarks and make a love letter to London. Cruise said, quote, "I wanted fog and I wanted the cobblestone streets and also to be right there by the Tower of London and the castle in the background."
That's so cool. In the special features, Cruise and McQuarrie discuss their working relationship. They say Cruise comes to the process from an emotional point of view and McQuarrie comes from an analytical point of view, so they check each other very well. It's interesting because now when you hear McQuarrie talk, he is always talking about coming from an emotional point of view. He's evolved as a filmmaker in such a fascinating way, and it seems like Cruise has rubbed off on him and his approach.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear them talk about that at the time, that McQuarrie was more analytical, and now McQuarrie's always talking about emotion and making sure the emotion is in the frame and stuff.
Right.
All right, let's get into the writing process here, or at least the writing that was done before the production began, since we know a lot of the writing happens after shooting starts. We don't know the exact order of things here, but we do know they had a writer's room for Rogue Nation, which included Seth Grahame-Smith, Drew Pearce, Drew Goddard, Chris Yost, McQuarrie, of course. J.J. Abrams would pop in every once in a while, and Simon Pegg even called in sometimes. Take a listen to our Seth Grahame-Smith interview to hear more about that, since he was one of the writers in the room. And the episode with Seth Grahame-Smith that's episode number 111.
Wow. Yeah, I'm still fascinated by this room and what everyone was contributing. And I know Seth was sort of, you only remember so much, especially when it's from such a short amount of time, but I still want more details about this and why Drew Pearce ended up with the story credit when nobody else did.
Yeah, it's interesting that initial trade article kind of brought up Drew Pearce and McQuarrie, or maybe it was the one about the Man from U.N.C.L.E. The Cruise was working with Drew Pearce and Christopher McQuarrie, so maybe it was just them at first, and then they brought in a writer's room, or a writer's room was first? I don't know. Good question.
Here's something that was important to Cruise for this movie. He said to McQuarrie, "I want the team to be experiencing what you and I experience when we're making a movie." He wanted them to take that sense of camaraderie and chaos and translate it into the movie. It seems like they carried over the idea even more into Fallout.
Early on, McQuarrie made the decision to split the team in half, so he'd have Ethan and Benji on one track and Luther and Brant on another track. He liked the idea of pairing the earliest team member in Luther and the latest team member in Brant as sort of an odd couple, since they don't know each other and don't trust each other because they'd only met once on screen briefly at the end of Ghost Protocol.
That's interesting. Do you think that works, the splitting the team?
Yeah, I think it worked really well. I think at least I love the duo of Luther and Brant. I think they're a fun comic duo, and I think it really works for that movie. Going forward, I wouldn't want that to happen again, but I think it worked. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think it worked. I mean, I like that Rogue Nation is in a lot of ways a kind of buddy cop movie with Ethan and Benji.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously there's so many wonderful moments between them and Benji having his big speech in that gadget boat and stuff like that. I mean, it's awesome.
Well, speaking of the end of Ghost Protocol, there is the reference to the Syndicate as Ethan Hunt listens to the latest mission as he walks away and disappears. The Syndicate, of course, is a reference to the old TV show, in which it was more like a version of the Mafia. Initially, McQuarrie was thinking that he didn't want the Syndicate to carry over from the last scene of Ghost Protocol, but somehow it just felt like it needed to be in the movie. There was also an element early on of Solomon Lane trying to recruit Ethan into the Syndicate, but that fell by the wayside. And you know all about the Syndicate, Charles, because you are a diehard fan of the show. What do you think about the translation?
Well, I'm a big fan of the earlier seasons. I really haven't seen as much of the later ones. I mean, I watched all of season 5 before we talked to Leslie Ann Warren. And, the Syndicate was peppered in throughout, but was a bigger deal in the later seasons. So I know of them, but I'm not an expert. I'll say that.
Were they brought in an effort to make the show cheaper too?
Well, that was apparently on the later seasons. They didn't want to have to create the foreign countries as often because it was expensive. So they having a local villain in the mafia, and I think it was like the Italian mafia, to have that be the villain in America made it easier for them to do the episodes and not have to change all the signage to be a foreign country and stuff like that.
Wow, a nice hometown villain there.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. In several drafts of the script, Maggie Q's character from MI3 returned and died at the end of the first act of the movie. They've flirted with the idea of killing off a team member to make you really hate a villain. And McQuarrie has also said he considered doing that with Jeremy Renner in Fallout. And McQuarrie's told that story before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story, I believe, is that he called Renner and said, "Will you come back so that I can kill you off?" And Renner said, "Absolutely not." So there is still hope. We have not seen any evidence that Renner is coming back in 7, but we always hold a candle for him and
yes.
Brant. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they also talked about bringing Kittredge back for this movie, but they ultimately decided to create a new character, which of course Alec Baldwin ended up playing. And we love that because Baldwin is amazing. R.I.P. Alan Hunley. And obviously Henry Cerny in the end is now coming back to play Kittredge in MI7, and we couldn't be more excited.
It all worked out, is what you're trying to say. And I agree with you, Charles.
Yep.
McQuarrie said that he wrote the screenplay while listening to a music cue written by Bernard Herrmann, but he wouldn't reveal what piece of music it was for because, quote unquote, reasons that would be revealed. This is very mysterious, and we're not sure if those reasons have ever been revealed. Does anyone know what he's talking about? Was he going to remake a movie that has a famous Bernard Herrmann score? Was he going to incorporate that score into the music of the movie?
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to ask him about.
Yeah.
That's I came across that and I was very confused as to what that meant.
Yeah.
When will we find this out? And I don't know if we ever did. So if anybody knows what he's talking about when McQuarrie was talking about listening to this Bernard Herrmann cue while writing the screenplay, please let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
Ricky Jay was also a technical advisor on the movie. He's a famous stage magician, actor, and writer. If you look him up, you'll surely recognize him from some of David Mamet's or Paul Thomas Anderson's work or plenty of other things. Anyway, Ricky Jay made the suggestion that in the opera scene, Solomon Lane should trick Ethan into shooting the person he wants to save. That didn't make it into the movie, but that's what gave McQuarrie the idea to have Ethan shoot the Chancellor to take him out of harm's way.
Ricky Jay died a couple of years ago, too, so we have to say.
Yes, and so we should point that out, that rest in peace, Ricky Jay. He is awesome. Yeah. If you see his face and you hear his voice, you'll know exactly. He was the narrator in Magnolia.
Yes. Oh, so amazing. I was like, oh, we should get him on the show, and then I realized that he had passed away, which is very sad, so... Sorry.
Yeah.
Ricky Jay, we love you. At one point in the script, we actually saw Benji's sad home life. He has a spare apartment with an empty fishbowl and a kick-ass home entertainment system. Ethan sends him a self-destructing message through the latest Halo game, and in the end, it destroys Benji's amazing home entertainment system. It made for a good laugh, but didn't fit in mission. It just went too far. So did they shoot that?
That's what I don't know. It was brought up, and so I know it was scripted. I don't think they filmed it, but that's another good question to ask.
They probably took that in typical McQuarrie fashion. They took that, and then he is playing video games at the office, right?
Yes.
Doesn't he have a little thing? Yeah.
So it elements of it ended up in the movie, but not. But that would have been really hilarious to have, he's got this amazing home entertainment system. The message comes in and then it says this will self-destruct in 5 seconds, and then Benji's like, no, and then the home entertainment system explodes. That would have been hilarious.
Yeah, good gag.
So now we get to November of 2013 when Paramount announced a release date of December 25th, 2015. Around this time, Drew Pearce finished a draft. The big difference in his script was they had a multi-generational IMF. They wanted to bring back Dan Briggs from season 1 of the TV show who had disappeared. Drew wrote the script in 5 weeks and gave it to McQuarrie right before Christmas because he had to go do another job. In different iterations, Dan Briggs was a good guy or a bad guy, or you weren't sure if he was good or bad, and a lot of that ended up getting funneled into the Ilsa character.
Do we have a confirmation on this, or was this just the reporting at the time?
I'm not sure what this source is for this one, but I assume it's from the Blu-ray or the commentary or something. This is from McQuarrie. I'm pretty positive this is straight from McQuarrie.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have heard different things too. That the first, there was a prologue set in the '60s. A lot of tantalizing stuff around this. We would do weird stuff to read this version of the script.
If anyone has the script out there, just so you know, we'll do weird stuff for you.
We'll do weird stuff for it. Yes, please send it along. McQuarrie says that he wanted to write the best female character that we'd seen in the Mission Impossible franchise. And I think that we can all agree that he definitely accomplished that. Cruise had this whole vision of Rogue Nation as a date movie. The underground cellar is boy meets girl. The opera is their first date. The motorcycle sequence is their breakup. But a big rule for them was that Ilsa can never be the woman in peril. That was something they carried over from Edge of Tomorrow. So that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, really cool. According to the Empire Spoiler Podcast, Ilsa in the original script was more cocky and more mischievous, and Ethan and his team couldn't count on her to follow the plan. McQuarrie had an actress in mind, but said he left that idea behind after meeting with the marketing team and realized it wasn't right for what they were looking for in marketing the movie. He started looking for a specific archetype that fit into what they wanted. He was chasing after this idea until he had compromised what it was. He was ready to cast someone who was fantastic, but still not quite the thing that he set out to get from what the marketing team had told him. She was a great actress, but it was darker and more serious than what they wanted it to be. On the last possible day, they went back through the auditions and came across Rebecca Ferguson. Within 30 seconds of watching her tape, they realized she's Ingrid Bergman. She didn't fit the archetype McQuarrie was looking for, and she was completely unlike the other actress. They flew her off another set to bring her in to shoot a test, and the rest is history. Now, Screen Rant reported on April 24th, 2014, that Jessica Chastain may have been offered a role for MI5 as Tom Cruise's right-hand woman. Was she maybe one of these earlier versions of Ilsa that McQuarrie mentioned?
Maybe. I don't know. We have never gotten confirmation on this. Yeah, I mean, I think she would have been great too, but definitely Rebecca Ferguson has something else.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear about like this earlier version of Ilsa that was like more cocky and mischievous. And there was also a darker version of her at one point too that was more serious. And I don't know, it's just all these different iterations. And I'm so obviously glad that we got who Ilsa is now, who's just amazing.
Yeah, and also fascinating that he is talking to the marketing people so early.
Yes, that was a whole big story he's told a couple of times about the marketing team was like so surprised that he went to them and was like, what do you guys need? Tell me what you need.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. And I've heard stories about this, about John Lasseter too, how he would always, after pitching something, in the C-suite, would go over to the marketing people and start talking to them. Because if you get them on your team early enough that your movie is really going to be supported in all the ways that you need. So, I mean, total boss move on McQuarrie's part, I think.
Yeah, very, very smart.
Very smart. Well, in any case, on July 9th, 2014, The Hollywood Reporter announced that Swedish actress Rebecca Ferguson will be joining the cast of MI5 alongside Tom Cruise, Jeremy Renner, and Simon Pegg. It is also announced at this point that Alec Baldwin might be joining the cast. So I guess he hadn't been confirmed yet, but he was eyeing it.
One last thing about the script before we go on to other stuff. Going back a couple of months, on May 9th, 2014, The Hollywood Reporter announced that Will Staples had been attached to write the screenplay for MI5 for Cruise and McQuarrie. Now, this is a name we haven't heard before. At this point in 2014, Will Staples didn't have any movie credits, but recently he wrote Without Remorse for Paramount that just came out earlier this year or last year. And maybe we need to ask McQuarrie about this as well. What do you make of it?
Now I want to talk to him. Now I think we should reach out and see what he's got to say. That's really interesting that it was so late in the. Do you know where this was in the kind of timeline of the writer's room, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, production started, I believe, in August, and this is May of 2014. So it's during all the writing process. I mean, we never heard Will Staples' name as part of the writer's room. So and also the trades have gotten things wrong before. So who knows? But I think it's worth maybe asking McQuarrie. We need to add it to our list of things to ask McQuarrie about.
Yeah, I would love to know what that is. Wow, that's really fascinating. I wonder if he was like going to be on set or something, or yeah. Wow. Okay. Now we really gotta track this down. So let's get into the production, if you're ready, Charles, for this.
Yeah, let's do it.
The code name for this movie was Taurus, which is coming off of Ghost Protocol's Ares. And since Ghost Protocol, they've followed this pattern using zodiac signs for the code names. Fallout was Gemini, MI7 is Libra, and we've seen one report that MI8 is going by Scorpio. So Taurus for Rogue Nation is also a fun kind of pun because of the Taurus sequence where Ethan is grabbing the thing underwater.
Let's talk about some key crew members. Of course, there is Oscar-winning cinematographer Robert Elswit, who was the first and still only DP to return for a second mission after he shot Ghost Protocol. He also shot some Curtis Hanson movies, Tony Gilroy movies, and some Paul Thomas Anderson movies, including There Will Be Blood, which won him the Oscar. If you haven't, you absolutely should listen to our interview with Elswit. It's one of my favorites because he's a hero of mine, and he's hilariously blunt in our chat.
Yeah.
The Elswit interview is episodes 34 and 35. Anyway, when promoting Rogue Nation, McQuarrie had this to say about Elswit. He has an incredibly incisive eye in terms of how to cover a scene in the simplest way imaginable. He would watch Tom and I work together. He would watch the two of us discuss story or craft a scene, and then he would step in at a key moment and ask a specific question that would upend everything that we had been working on. By the end of the film, he had sort of broken me out of a more conservative style of filmmaking.
Here's a good quote from Cruise about Elswit. He said, he comes from that school of Conrad Hall and Owen Reutzmann, that kind of classical storytelling that has enormous range. Also, I mean, here's a guy who can shoot something like The Opera House and yet bring wonderful drama to intimate moments like The Safe House. To have that kind of range, I think he's a great collaborator and someone I look forward to working with for many, many movies. Side note, as of yet, he has not worked with Robert Elswit again, but we can hope.
Simon Pegg said of Elswit, "I like Bob when he smokes a pipe. I think every DP should smoke a pipe. It just looks right." Pegg also talks about how Elswit knows how to light a scene with empathy. He said, "Sometimes you can feel like an object as an actor, but that's not the case with Elswit."
So next up, we've got production designer Jim Bissell, who also returned from Ghost Protocol. Bissell designed E.T., The Rocketeer, Jumanji, Jack Reacher, and many others. McQuarrie said this about Jim Bissell: "What's great about Jim is how in tune with story he is. He's very, very much involved in the development of the screenplay and is, at times, asking deeper questions about the characters, which inform how he designs sets and how those sets are decorated."
Yes, we love Jim Bissell, and trust us, we are trying to track him down. Don't you worry.
A lot of this also, I think, speaks to what McQuarrie has said about drifting off of Ghost Protocol's vibe, which is very interesting.
I don't know if drifting would be the exact word that he used for it, but yeah, like he said that he was kind of continuing the feeling of Ghost Protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was bringing back Jim Bissell, the production designer, and Elswit, the cinematographer. However, he did have a new costume designer, Joanna Johnston. A lot of her earlier work was for Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the Back to the Future sequels, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Forrest Gump, Contact, Saving Private Ryan, Castaway, Munich, War of the Worlds. She also did M. Night Shyamalan's two best movies, The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. Unbreakable is one of my favorite movies. So she has got quite the resume. Joanna designed that amazing yellow dress for Ilsa. It was a process of elimination to decide that yellow color. Maggie Q had the red dress in MI3, Paula Patton had the green one in Ghost Protocol, and they didn't want black or white, so they settled on yellow. Johnston had to create a dozen different versions of that dress, each with a different function, one for the rooftop, one for descending the side of the building, etc., etc. They made all these dresses from scratch, and they were all made by hand.
Wow. Love that dress. Greg Smers was the second unit director. We love Greg. Greg is a stuntman going back to the 80s, and he's been a stunt coordinator on a bunch of movies. He's only been a second unit director on a few movies and actually a few episodes of Alias. Also, our good friend Wade Eastwood was the stunt coordinator. Wade had just come off stunt coordinating Jack Reacher, and he coordinated some of the other movies here and there while also being a stuntman going back to the 90s. Christopher McQuarrie's brother Doug is a retired Navy SEAL and was a technical advisor on the movie. And, of course, Eddie Hamilton was the editor, and Joe Kramer composed the music, but we'll get more into their work as we delve into post-production, but obviously we've talked to both of those gentlemen, and it's very much worth checking out those interviews on the podcast as well.
Yeah, Eddie Hamilton was episodes 26 and 27, and Joe Kramer episodes 104 and 105.
Boom!
All right, and so I'm just going to finish off this part one with some nerdy stuff. The movie was shot on film with Panavision anamorphic lenses, but there are also some mini-cam and even GoPro camera shots. The underwater stuff was done on Alexa 65. The aerial establishing shots of London at night, right before the record store scene, are digital. And the newspaper cutouts on the wall in Ethan's old hideout were shot with a digital camera with a macro lens. So some little nerdy tidbits there for you. And I think with that, we should wrap up and come back next week and continue on the production then.
Sounds good to me. You got anything else to unleash before we go?
Yeah, I want to tell everybody to sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/lightthefuse. We have bonus episodes every week. Please sign up and support the show. It makes this show possible every week for us to be able to deliver these episodes to you. I also want to give a special shout out to Jacob from Holland. Thank you, Jacob. And also to our mixer and editor, Luke Burson, to our music composer, Kevin Blumenfeld, and thank you to our intern, Parth Marate. He actually helped dig up some articles for this. I should list our sources as well. We had many articles and interviews in the trades and other movie websites like Collider and Slash Film, of course, the Empire Spoilers podcast, the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast, which had both Cruz and McQuarrie on. We also got a lot from the Blu-ray with the Target exclusive bonus disc, iTunes special features, and of course, a bunch of tweets from Christopher McQuarrie. So please, again, sign up for our Patreon. You can also buy a shirt or a magnet or a bag or phone case or whatever from our TeePublic store, which is linked from our website, lightthefusepodcast.com. That's in the merch section. You can also head over to our episode guide and check out all the awesome show notes we have for every week. and follow us on social media. And I guess that's about it, right, Drew?
Yeah, if you could just like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this podcast, it helps us out and makes us more aware, makes people more aware, I should say, of the podcast. So that would be a huge help. And yeah, I think that's it, Charles. And then we'll be back next week with part 2.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcast@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.